Well, good evening, everyone. If you're just logging in right now, you are joining us for a leadership focus event here at Kyria Network. These leadership focus events have been really insightful throughout this year as we've taken a different sphere of influence and we've been able to welcome a panel of contributors who have spoken into that sphere of influence and spoken into that leadership stream and brought their wisdom, their experience and their growth in this area, really. So we're just going to give it a moment for a couple more of you to log into this live. We see a few of you already joining us right now, so you're very welcome. So please let me just introduce myself and tell you more about Kyria. So I'm Amy Summerfield. I'm the CEO of Kyria Network. Kyria Network is a network for women in leadership, and we're here to champion, empower, and release women into spheres of influence, whatever that sphere, whether that be business, whether that be the charitable sector, the creative sector, home, church, etc. We're here to champion, empower, encourage, and release you. And so the purpose of these evenings is to give you opportunity to delve more into a different leadership topic. And you may know, if you've already been following these leadership focuses, after this 30-minute conversation, there's an invitation for you to join a closed Zoom room for 15 minutes where you might have another question for one of our panel. So tonight's leadership focus is actually all about finance and fundraising. And I'm sure you'd all agree with me, this is actually quite a hot topic at this moment in time when we look at the rising cost of living and our struggling organisations and churches or whatever our contexts are. There's always a little bit of a worry and there's always a bit of a concern or a struggle when it comes to finance and fundraising, isn't it? But we believe in a God who cares and we believe in a God who resources. So I'm delighted to introduce to you Shirley and Diane and Tracy, who are going to be using some of their experience and influence within this field to hopefully offer you some keys and offer you some help with regards to how we as leaders can be better stewards of finances and could be more savvy when it comes to fundraising. So they're just going to introduce themselves right now, and I'll just come over to you first, Shirley. Why not you just introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Yeah, hi there. So my name's Shirley Berry, and I've had a variety of roles that might sort of touch on the subject. I've run a small charity. I've been a part of a national charity, which I was head of fundraising, and I work in a foundation, and I'm also a leader in a church. So I think there's all sorts of spheres there that would touch on this topic, but it's great to be with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here with us as well. And where are you joining us from, Shirley?
From Glasgow.
From Glasgow, fabulous. Thank you so much for being with us. And Tracy?
Hi everyone, I'm joining you from Essex, and I currently lead an organisation called Langley House Trust, and Langley House Trust is a Christian organisation that houses and helps offenders, and we're a £15 million organisation. We've got a couple of subsidiaries that are much smaller than that, and I also am a director of a church and a network of churches.
Great, thanks Tracy, thanks for being with us this evening. And Diane?
Hi there, my name's Diane McWilliam. I am the Scottish advisor for Cinnamon Network, and I also co-lead the church engagement team there. I also do a bit of other bits and pieces of work with a voluntary sector, freelance, and also Glasgow University. And I am also coming from Glasgow, where it's sunny tonight.
Come on, it does look very sunny. We're very jealous. Well, thank you so much for being with us this evening. We've got a couple of people who are watching us right now, and we always look forward to the fact that these Kyria focus can stay out on our page and will also be used on our YouTube later so people can catch up. But let's make a start as we delve deeper into this topic of finance and fundraising. And Shirley, we'd love to come to you first, if that's okay. And the first question that we'd like to ask you is this: how can our attitude towards money and finances have a profound effect on our life and on our leadership well-being?
Great. Well, it's a great question, and it's had me thinking and pondering for this last wee while. I think for me, there isn't any disconnect. You know, I think our attitude, our approach, our reality within finance and fundraising will have an impact. And I think it is profound. on our leadership and in our well-being in that leadership and our health. And I think what kind of came to my mind as I thought about it was the words integrity and trust. And then thinking about also operating out of a place of mercy and not being bound to the wrong things. Because actually that's often what causes a breakdown in our well-being, because we get a little bit sort of incongruent and we try to serve two masters in effect. So I think it really kind of sits in that place, and I think that can happen quite subtly, and we can sometimes be caught unaware of it. I think in a context of leadership within an organisation, as I said, I ran a small charity, I worked in a national charity, I worked in a church, and I think it's something about drawing on those verses in Jeremiah 17, where it talks about blessed is the person who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. They'll be like a plant rooted by waters, and even in times of drought, they'll produce good fruit. And I think that verse has always been quite close to my heart when I've tried to lead in a financial situation, because there are times of drought.
Yeah.
There's times where things are complex and difficult. And how do you lead in that with integrity, with relationship that doesn't impact your well-being and health, both with God and with one another. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges in leading, because the reality is that there are going to be times of change. It's not, somebody said to me once, it's not that the money all dries up. There's the same amount of money that goes around. It's just the landscape changes and you have to figure out what it looks like, where that's going to come from, and be creative within it. But I think in amongst that, or in the midst of that, sometimes as leaders, we can often sacrifice relationships, and we can find ourselves perhaps suffering from that in our well-being. So I think that verse in Jeremiah is very close to my heart. And then also thinking about what is in our hands, I think that's been really helpful in keeping a leader healthy. It's not all about just more, and it's not all about following the trend. It's thinking about what do you have in your hand and how can you use it. Because I think God sort of principles that, doesn't he? That, there's no point in asking for more when you've got something, thinking about the boy with his lunch and feeding the 5,000, or the widow's offering, time and time again. There's a real principle of just using what God gives us and expecting that God will multiply in the oddest of places, and looking for it in that way. And just finally, I would just share something about, we all know the parable of the shrewd manager that we find in Luke's gospel, and we know that that's not preached on very much because everybody's kind of a bit confused by it. But there's a wonderful commentary by Kenneth Bailey, the theologian, and he kind of pushes in, and I would encourage anyone that's listening to this to go away and look. There's a YouTube a talk by him, right. But that's where the mercy comes, the leadership to keep our well-being and our health. It's operating out of that place of mercy. That parable, there's actually a parable and a poem in there, and Kenneth Bailey would say the parable is about the manager who accepts that he's mucked it up, but he falls on the mercy of the master. And also the poem is about how you cannot serve two masters. So for me, those are really deep principles for keeping health, keeping a relationship, and also finding our way through what is often a functional thing, which is finance, but actually it's a heart thing, which is following God. So, yeah.
Wow, what a great start. Thank you so much, Shirley, for that wisdom already. And that piece of writing that you referred to, do send it to us and we'll pop that out on the link later, because that sounds like a wonderful resource for us all to engage with. If you're just tuning into this live, a reminder that you're watching a conversation about leadership in finance and fundraising. There is an opportunity at 8:30 at the end of this live to join us in a Zoom room. Look out for that link in this chat bar. Just join at any time and just feel free to wait in the waiting room, because you may have a question a little bit more to what Shirley has just talked about, or Tracy or Diane in a moment. So we'll carry on and we'll come to you next, Tracy. You know, as leaders, we're called to be great stewards of our resources, aren't we, including finances, but we're also called to exercise faith. And I wonder, for you and your experience, is there a tension here, and how can leaders navigate this tension well?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Well, I think there is a bit of a tension at times, and it's interesting that Shirley mentioned the fact of know what's in your hand, because I think good stewardship starts with knowing actually what are the resources that you've got currently, you know, how much, you know, God's given us the God-given ability to understand finances. We don't need to be accountants to understand the basics of finances, of how much is in the bank, how much comes in on a monthly basis, how much do we need to spend. You know, my accountant keeps saying things like cash is king, and it truly is with money, isn't it? You know, but what cash you've got is the important bit. And even if you're a very successful organization or church or charity, actually you can run out of cash very easily. So knowing your true position is first and foremost. So then you can actually work out what the gaps are, because when you know what the gaps are, you actually know what you need faith for. And I think that's the first and fundamental thing you need to understand, because if you don't understand those gaps, you're not going to be able to pray, you know, into it. And I think God gives us the, you know, the stewardship to actually firstly do all we can practically to get ourselves in a good position. I think Shirley spoke a bit about that, but also knowing where we need to be. So understanding really what resources it takes to fulfill the vision that we've got, or the current work that we're undertaking. And actually, you know, not boxing God in, because I do think that when we have faith for finance, actually sometimes God comes back in something different than we perhaps anticipated. So I think it's understanding that. But a little example I would give is we got notice that we were going to lose a grant of 1.4 million.
Wow.
It was going to go to open tender. It did go to open tender. The open tender that went to the open market, which is a very busy market that I run the charity in, it was clear that the open tender was something we couldn't deliver mission on. And I think that's first and foremost, that when you understand what you've been called to do, if you understand that that work is never going to be done through a contract, there's no point in going for that contract, and we didn't. And the government officials were gobsmacked, really unbelievably gobsmacked that we didn't go for it. Miraculously, God answered our prayer in the sense of no one else went for that tender. And the government officials within a few weeks came to us and said, would you carry on delivering that work? And we got that work for another 2 years. Now, amazing. God answered it in a miraculous way. I couldn't have foreseen that was going to happen, and God was going to foresee it. But us doing all practically, I actually worked out a contingency plan of what we would do if we didn't get that money, because you've got to do that. You've got to act practically. And I think that's the balance of faith and finance, that actually, you know, we've got to do everything we can to plan for the worst case scenario, but believe in the best case scenario. And I think that is what faith and finance is about.
Really good. Thanks, Tracy, for that great wisdom. And yeah, Diane, we'd love to come to you next. What attitude should we as Christians carry about finances? Avoiding the worst extremes of poverty and prosperity mindset, what would you say is the attitude that we as Christians should carry about finances?
I think the attitude we should carry about finances is the same attitude that we should carry about everything else. Humility and being like Jesus.
Yeah.
We look at the fruit of the Spirit. We look at that amazing passage in Philippians where it talks about how Jesus humbled himself. We hear the challenge over and over again in Scripture about becoming like Jesus, becoming more like Jesus, being refined, being honed, being sanctified. We need to be like Jesus, and that is at the very heart of the attitude that we hold as we look at every aspect of our life, not just our finances. But I did want to just pick up a couple of things. So first, thinking about trust.